The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are simply that, opinions. All are presumed innocent until proven otherwise in a court of law. Sensitive topics are discussed. Discretion is advised.
A mother of four fatally shot through her neighbor's door during an intense verbal altercation, but will her actions be seen as self-defense? Susan Lorincz faces manslaughter and assault charges in the shooting death of her neighbor Ajike Owens. Police say Owens was shot through Lorinc's front door as she repeatedly knocked on it in June of 2023. Earlier in the day, Lorincz was accused of throwing skates at Owens' children while they were playing outside. I'm Vinny Politan, and welcome to the Court TV podcast. This week, we have opening statements in the knocking neighbor shooting trial. Here, both sides lay out their cases for the men and women tasked with determining whether or not this shooting was justified.
This is the Court TV podcast with Vinny Politan.
Mr. Smith, are you ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor. Please, the court.
Yes, sir. Let me know when you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. We are ready. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Adam Smith. I'm an assistant state attorney. On behalf of the State Attorney's Office, it's a privilege and an honor to be with you here today. I thank you for your time and I thank you for your attention to this case. This case is about how the defendant, Susan Lorincz, shot a bullet through her own locked front door and killed her unarmed neighbor, Ajike. You're going to hear in this case why this happened. You're going to hear about Susan Lorincz. You're going to hear about Miss Owens. They call her AJ Owens. You're going to hear that she has young children. There are two children that are going to come up in this case. Her young sons, Isaac Williams and Israel. You're going to hear why this shooting happened. Susan and Ajike were neighbors. They lived in a neighborhood that had quadruplexes in it, apartments. Susan lived across the street from Ajike. Next to Susan was a field. It wasn't on her property, but it was a field that was next to another apartment building. There were lots of children in this neighborhood. And a lot of those children, including Ms. Owens' children, played in that field. You're going to learn about some problems in this case, some issues between the defendant and Ms. Ajike Owens. You're going to hear that there were arguments between the two of them in the past, leading up to the shooting. You're going to hear what those arguments were about, the dog, the children. And you're going to hear that there were arguments between the two of them, multiple, but those arguments ended, and everyone went their separate ways. And in this case, you are going to hear in detail the shooting that happened on June 2nd, 2023. You are going to learn about the events leading up to the shooting. You're going to learn that that night, it was a Friday night, a summer night, and there were kids playing in the field next to Miss Lorinc's residence. They were playing in the field, and there was an adult with them, Mr. Franklin Cologne. And you're actually going to see the children and Mr. Cologne in the field playing. Why are you going to see them? Because the Marion County Sheriff's Office, in this case, took the defendant's phone, And we're able to get videos that the defendant took of the kids playing in the field. Miss Lorincz was filming the kids and Mr. Clone in the field on her patio, and then inside her house through windows. You're going to see these videos. You're going to see the kids playing. The kids finished playing as it got darker, a little bit before 9 o'clock. There's not many kids in the field anymore, but yet the defendant, Miss Lorincz, is still filming. What's she recording? Well, you're going to see that video too from her cell phone. She is videotaping roller skates that were left in the grass, according to her, about 5 or 6 feet from a sidewalk that lives up to her apartment. And in this roller skate incident, Miss Owens, Ajike's sons, were there. And the defendant has an interaction with them, has the roller skate in her hand, talking to them, and ends up throwing the roller skate. And says, "Here, go fetch." You're going to see where the roller skates were. But the interactions with the children didn't end there at the roller skates. There was another interaction right thereafter involving children of Miss Owens, where the defendant, she says in her statement to the detectives, which you will hear, that she is on her patio pavement area with an umbrella, telling the kids to leave, talking with her hands, while the kids, about 5 to 7 feet away from her, or in her words, not even close to her. It's at this point, after videotaping the kids, after videotaping the roller skates, after throwing the roller skates, after waving the umbrella around, interacting with these kids, you will hear that Susan calls 911. You're going to hear that 911 call. Pay attention to that 911 call. In the 911 call, you're going to hear Susan complaining about the kids trespassing, leaving toys, screaming, yelling. She's going to say that one of the kids accused her of taking an iPad. Then she's going to accuse the kids of mouthing off to her. The kids saying they're going to beat her up, they're going to get somebody to kill her. And she calls 911. Now that 911 call is made just before 9 o'clock. And on the 911 call, the dispatcher informs Miss Lorincz that they will send a unit out. And Miss Lorincz confirms that she is now in her house with her door locked. It is at this point, after Susan calls 911 on the kids, she's in her room, in her apartment with the door locked, that Ajike Owens comes into the picture. You're going to hear testimony from a Uriel Rodriguez. He's a child. You're also going to hear testimony from Sheriff Gardner. He's an adult. But they also live in the neighborhood, nearby, both Susan and Ajike. They were outside that evening. And you're going to hear testimony about Ajike walking over after this interaction between Ajike's children and the defendant, the roller skates and all. You're going to hear about how Ajike walked over to Susan's residence. She was angry as she was walking over, but she was unarmed. And you're going to hear testimony of Ajike at the door of Susan. She's angry. She's banging on the door. She's yelling. She's even cussing. People are going to say that. That's what was seen. That's what was heard. You're even going to hear from a neighbor, Miss Yvonne Costa, who lives right next to Susan, of what she heard in her own apartment and how the banging was loud. You're going to hear this evidence. And while this Ajike is banging on the door, you're also going to hear then a gunshot happens while Ajike is still outside. And while you're here that Ajike was outside banging on the door, saying things to Miss Owens, to the defendant, Miss Lorincz, Ajike doesn't go for the door. Doesn't try to break into the room, the apartment of Miss Lorincz. But yet there is still a gunshot that strikes unarmed Ajike Owens there on the defendant's patio. She runs off the patio, falls into the grass, and dies from the gunshot wound. Ladies and gentlemen, there's no question in this case that Ajike Owens was shot by the defendant. The defendant admits in her interview to Detective Stitt that she fired her loaded pistol and killed and shot through the door, the locked door, and hit Miss Owens. The Marion County Sheriff's Office collected the .380 pistol that Susan used to shoot Ajike. It was found in a trash can in Susan's bedroom. They found a shell casing inside Miss Susan's apartment. You're going to hear the medical examiner, Dr. Shandell Norford, perform an autopsy on Ajike. She found a projectile inside Ajike's body. You're going to hear from Jamie Williamson from the Florida Department of Law Enforcement that said the projectile that was found in the body of Ajike and the shell casing that was found inside Susan's apartment all came and were fired from a gun that was also collected inside Susan's apartment in a trash can. There is no question that Susan Lorincz fired a bullet through her locked front door and killed Miss Owens. The question in this case is whether the defendant was justified in doing this. The defendant gives a statement to Detective Stitt, two different statements. It's a long statement. You're going to hear those. And you're going to hear the defendant say many things. You're going to hear the defendant say what happened leading up to the incident. And you're going to hear the defendant say that she was in fear. That's why she called 911. But you're also going to hear the defendant, and pay attention to the defendant's interview, is that when she was with the kids, with the roller skates, or with the umbrella, that incident, the kids tell her, "I'm going to tell my mom." And the defendant says, "Go tell your mom. I don't care." The defendant says that. Then you're going to go on and say the defendant was such in fear of Ajike Owens because of these prior incidents. But yet she says, "Go tell your mom. I don't care." You're hearing the defendant talk about calling 911 before Ajike Owens comes over to her house. And again, you're going to hear that 911 call. And I want to draw your attention one more time to that 911 call to listen. Because at the end of the defendant's complaints in that 911 call, out of the blue, you were going to hear this at the end. The defendant says, because what's going to happen is his mom's going to go out, wait for the officer, and run and say, "Oh, I was threatening her kids," which just isn't true. Out of the blue, she says that. Because that's believed what she thought was going to happen. So the defendant will make statements about leading up to the incident. Then the defendant is going to state what happened inside her residence when Ajike was there at the door. The defendant is going to say multiple times that she was in fear. Multiple times. But the defendant is going to describe what actually took place. The defendant is going to say she was actually in the bathroom when she heard the bang at the door. Then she goes out to the bathroom. From the bathroom, she goes out to the door and she hears that it's Ajike. Despite being so scared, she then goes back in to the bathroom to finish washing her hands. Then Banging starts again. She goes out, this time into the kitchen. To the phone, and then the banging won't stop. She's saying things to Ajike, telling Ajike to leave. And then the defendant goes into her bedroom, grabs the loaded firearm, then walks all the way back out to the locked front door, and the police are on the way as she's been told. She points at the door, fires one shot at the center of the door, shooting and killing Miss Ajike Owens. You're going to hear the defendant say that Ajike kept saying she was going to kill him. There will be testimony from other witnesses who are outside who did not hear that. And it's important to know that from the time that Susan Lorincz ended the phone call with her door locked inside her own apartment, knowing police were coming, until the time the defendant, or Ajike Owens, is shot, is within only 2.5 minutes. You're going to hear a lot of things the defendant says. You're going to hear the defendant talk about prior incidents with Ajike Owens. You're going to hear the defendant claim that an incident that happened approximately 16 months before this shooting, that Ajike attacked her with the no trespassing. But you're also going to hear from Morgan Robinson, another child who was there that day, and what she saw. You're also going to hear from Deputy Jonathan Coleman, who responded to that call, and that no arrest was made. You're going to hear evidence about an incident where the defendant called 911 about 6 months before the shooting, complaining about the kids. Deputy Kinsey arrived. You're going to hear from Deputy Kinsey. And that the defendant first complains about the kids trespassing and then makes a statement that Mom came over here and was banging on the door, said, "If you come to my kids again, I'm going to drag you out and beat you." You're going to hear that from that came out. But you're also going to hear from Deputy Kinsey how she came to the incident. She talked to the defendant. She even talked to Ajike Owens that night, and no arrest was made. We're also going to hear, like I said, a very long interview with the defendant and Detective Stith. And listen closely, because nowhere in that interview does the defendant talk about this threat of being dragged out and beaten that she says happened 6 months ago. He doesn't talk about it. The defendant is going to talk about the 911 call she made right after shooting Ajike Owens, and you're going to hear that 911 call. In that 911 call, you're going to hear the defendant crying. You're going to hear the defendant saying that she thought Ajike was going to break down the door. But you're also going to hear the defendant in the middle of this complain about trespassing, about leaving garbage around the house, kids. And she's going to talk about how Ajike had a broken down Honda that was garbage. In the middle of the 911 call, she just says that. You're going to hear the crying, but you're also going to see Deputy Barbosa's body cam, and you're going to hear Deputy Barbosa's testimony on the witness stand, and see one of the initial responding officers to the scene. How he goes right up to the door. Susan Lorincz comes out of the door. She's detained, and she's not crying. And she just wants to make sure that the door is closed so her cats don't get out. You're going to hear the defendant say that she's shot by the kitchen table. But you're also going to see pictures from the sheriff's office, lasers, trajectory rods, to help you determine where the defendant actually was when she was shot. You're going to hear the defendant talk about how her door wasn't secure. But you're going to hear from the defendant's landlord, Charles Gabbard, talk about the repairs that he had made to the door prior to this incident and how the door was secure at the time of this. You're going to hear the defendant say that she feared for her life. Now she shot because she thought it was either going to be her or it was going to be Ajike. But yet you're also going to hear the defendant say that she never even intended to hit Ajike when she shot. You're going to hear the defendant say that Ajike was at the door. The defendant believed that Ajike was going to break down that door and kill her. But you're also going to hear the defendant say that Ajike was at the door that evening, saying, I want to speak to you because I don't like the way you're talking to my sons. At the end of this case, you're going to hear that the defendant, Susan Lorincz, knowing the police were coming, was in her apartment with the door locked and shot through that locked front door and killed Ajike Owens, who was unarmed. We're going to present the evidence to you in this case. And after the evidence is presented, we are going to come back to you and ask that you find the defendant guilty of manslaughter by use of fire. Thank you.
Good morning. Allow your minds to wander back in time to June 2nd of 2023 in the Quill Run area of Ocala. 1662 Southwest 107th Lane, apartment number 3. The apartment where Susan Lorincz lived. She had just gone through hell. Ajike Owens, her neighbor, had come to her door and pounded that door violently for minutes. And Susan shot through that door. And what the evidence will show is that she shot through that door for self-defense. That she was terrified that A.J. Owens was going to break down that door and pulverize her. The evidence will show that Susan, at the time, was almost 59 years old, living alone in this tiny little apartment, 800 square feet. There was only one door that you could leave from. And in front of that door was A.J. Owens. An individual that was taller, that was 24 years her junior, and that outweighed her by 80 pounds. You will hear that Susan Lorincz was 59 years old, but had a multitude of medical infirmities. So physically, she was a lot older than 59 years old. And it was at this point, after she went through this hell, she called 911.
What was the address of the emergency?
1662 Southwest 107th Lane. Oh my God, this lady just tried to break down my door. I shot through the door. Oh my God.
Okay, repeat that address for me to make sure I have it correct.
1662 Southwest 107th Lane.
Okay, what is your name?
Susan Lorincz.
Okay, take a deep breath for me. Calm down.
Oh my God.
You said someone tried to break down your door, is that correct?
Yes, the woman was screaming and yelling and she was trying to break down my door and she was...
Okay, it was a female?
Yes. I didn't know what to do. I grabbed my gun and I shot at the door. She's like, "What are you going to get me?" Oh my God.
Okay, you said you shot at the door, is that correct?
Yes, I shot at the door because she wouldn't stop. I told her to get away and she wouldn't. She just begging to stay.
Okay, where's your gun now?
It's in my bedroom. I didn't know what to do. I was panicking. This is the woman who attacked me.
Okay, do you still see the subject?
I don't know where she is. I'm still in my house. I didn't open my door to her.
Is it just only you in the home?
Yes, it's just me.
Okay, I just need you to lock all your doors and windows, okay?
I have.
Okay, I'm going to stay on the line until the deputies get there.
Okay. My son said they were going to come and kill me.
And did you know her?
Yes, she's come after me several times because of her children. Her children keep trespassing over here. They're bothering me and bothering me. They won't fucking stop.
Is she a neighbor?
Yes.
Do you know where she lives?
She lives at 1663 Southwest 107th Lane.
1663 Southwest 107th Lane, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Do you know her name?
Ajike Owens.
I'm sorry, what was the first name?
Ajike, A-J-I-K-E.
Okay. Just let me know when you see the deputies. And like you said your gun is put up in the bedroom.
Yes,
is that
yes.
correct? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Jesus Christ.
And what unit number is for the subject?
I don't know. I don't know if she's one or two.
Okay.
She has an old broken down Honda or something, a white car in front of her house. It's all garbage.
You said a white Honda?
Yes. And then she has a new Acura.
Okay. You're doing good. Just take a deep breath for me. We do have deputies on the way, okay?
Okay.
And do you see the male subject, or you just see the female?
See, her boys were here earlier. They keep leaving their garbage all around the house.
Okay.
And then I told them to take the crap away, get the fuck out of here.
Do you know where the boyfriend is now?
I'm sorry?
Do you know where the boyfriend is now?
No.
Okay.
I'm not screaming outside now.
This entire trial will revolve around perceptions and the state of mind of Susan Lorincz when she shot through that door. This 911 call that I just played for you all will be presented into evidence. And in this 911 call, you hear it. You hear the quivering in her voice. You hear the shaking in her voice. And you hear at the beginning the absolute terror that she had. This 911 call, the evidence will show, occurred seconds after she shot through that door. And what the evidence will show, that at the time that she shot through that door, in her core, in her soul, in her heart, in everything that she was, she felt that she was in mortal injured. And she had to shoot because Ajike Owens, her neighbor, that was 24 years her junior, outweighed her by 80 pounds, was going to break in and pulverize her. Now, what the evidence will also show is that Susan Louise Lorincz was born in Passaic, New Jersey on July 23rd of 1964. She grew up in New Jersey. She was in New Jersey until she was approximately 30 years old. And approximately 1995 or so, she moved to Springville, Florida, in Hernando County. She moved there because her parents lived there, and she wanted to spend time with her parents. So she moved over there. You will hear that in the 30 years that she was in New Jersey, she was a productive member of society. She was an EMT, or she was on an ambulance. She was a waitress. She was gainfully employed. She was a home health care provider. She was an assistant bookkeeper. When she moved down to Hernando County back in 1995, she continued to be a productive member of society, where she was a chef. In about 2005 or so, she moved to Ocala. You'll hear that the reason why she moved to Ocala, Florida, was because she loved horses. She actually bred them. And she moved here because Ocala is a perfect place to be if you love horses. And that's why she moved here. You'll hear that at that point her mother had passed away, so there was no reason for her to be in Hernando County. And when she moved to Ocala, she continued to be a productive member of society. And she was a chef until COVID. You will hear through the evidence that in January of 2020, she moved to 1662 Southwest 107 Lane, apartment 3, where this incident occurred. You will come to find out post-COVID, she was no longer a chef because that business had fried out, as we all remember. So she went to school and she became an insurance agent. And she worked for insurances, selling insurance. She was a licensed Florida insurance agent. She worked from home, and she worked from home full time. And that's what she did. That's how she maintained herself. That's how she supported herself. You'll hear that in June of 2023, she was almost 59 years old, 58, almost 59 years old. But her body was much older than a 59-year-old. She suffered from many medical infirmities. You will hear that she had issues with her knee that caused countless surgeries that involved damaged tendons and ligaments in her right knee and a partial knee replacement in the left knee. Her right knee literally goes backwards because of all the damage to it. She had a car accident in 2019 that required invasive spine surgery, and she has diminished feeling in her legs and feet as a result of that spinal cord injury. You will hear that in 2021, she had a cervical fusion because of that car accident in 2019. She also had an aneurysm on her kidney. She had a torn muscle in her left shoulder and torn rotator cuff in 5 places. You will hear that she also had a herniated thoracic disc and carpal tunnel in both hands, and had surgery on her left hand because of it in 2022. You'll also hear that she is a survivor of ovarian cancer, and she's in remission. Needless to say, with all his physical ailments, though 59 years old, almost 59 years old in June of 2023, inherently, she was significantly older physically. You will come to find out that Susan lived alone in this apartment, like I mentioned. A tiny little 800 square foot apartment, only one way to leave, which is that entrance, front door. You will come to find out that because she was alone, because she was older, because she had all these medical infirmities, she had bought a gun for protection, which many people her age and her situation do. Now, you will come to find out as well that in June of 2023, June 2nd, 2023, wasn't the first time that she had issues with Ajike Owens. In February 25th of 2022, you'll hear testimony and evidence that she had a run-in with AJ. And in fact, that was the first time that she met her. Shortly after, Susan had that fusion in her neck. You will hear that there were no trespassing signs all over her yard. And you will come to find out that AJ Owens would walk her dog and defecate on her property. And that made Susan upset. So February 25th of 2022, she spoke to Miss Owens and said, please stop having your dog defecate on my property. You'll hear that AJ told her, you're a renter. It's not private property. You don't own it. I'm going to do whatever I want. And if this is where the dog wants to defecate, so be it. Susan told her, there's no trespassing sign. Leave. And you will hear evidence that AJ, this is the first time she met her, took that no trespassing sign, threw it at Susan, and it hit Susan's leg. This is where the fear started, in Susan's heart, in Susan's core, towards AJ Owens. You will hear that in December of 2022, it was a chilly day. And there was an issue with one of AJ's kids trespassing on Susan's property. And AJ came to Susan's house, same apartment, 1622, apartment number 3, and started banging on her door and saying things. Saying, come out. And if you don't come out, I'm going to beat you till you're bloody. And you're going to hear evidence that pounding on that door, December 2022, 6 months before this incident, damage was caused to Susan's door and door frame. And you will hear evidence that that damage was there on the night in question, on June 2nd, 2023. You will hear evidence that Charles Gabbard, who is the landlord of Susan and the owner of that property, attempted to fix that door frame, but didn't fix it completely. Because you'll see pictures that the damage was still there on that fateful night. And you will hear that Susan always knew after that incident, after December of 2022, that there was damage. And she took precautions. And the precautions that she took is she bought a fire. The other precaution that she took is at night she would put a chair under the doorknob in order to have more support. She got a chain for more support in that apartment as well. She did everything a reasonable person would do in order to be safe in her home. June 2nd, 2023 came along. Susan was starting a new job. And she was getting everything ready. Everything ready for her new job. It was summertime, so the kids were home. And she was getting everything ready for the new job. And the day went into night. And it started getting dark. Susan thought it was raining. So she took her umbrella, it was dark, and she went outside. When she went outside, she noticed that there were kids milling all around. And there were skates on her property. You will hear evidence that Susan has all these medical infirmities that she falls on. So she was scared that she would fall and hurt her knees even further because of the skates area. So she asked the kids to pick up the skates. And you will hear that the kids told her, you get them. So Susan did get them and threw them in the yard. And then they threatened her. She got scared. She ran into her house. But she was in a rush, so she locked the door. But she forgot to put that chair for extra support under the doorknob. She calls 911. You'll hear that 911 call, and you'll hear her fears. As she's in that 911 call, as she's speaking to 911, she goes to the bathroom. When she goes to the bathroom, she hears pounding on the sliding glass door. The 911 is over, and in her mind, she's thinking, wow, that was really quick. That must be Marion County, because she heard loud pounding. She thought it was law enforcement. So she goes out. And like I said, you'll see pictures. This is a tiny little apartment. She'll go to that area. She went to the sliding glass door, and she hears the pounding, and she realizes it's not law enforcement. It's A.J. Owens. And A.J. Owens is mad. She's mad as hell. You'll hear testimony from children that were there, that saw A.J. Owens walk from her apartment to Susan's house. And you will hear that A.J. Owens was walking with purpose. And she was mad as hell. And walking towards that apartment. You hear that she walked to the sliding glass door, and then the door, the front door. Susan is in her apartment. Nowhere to go. She is trapped. She has nowhere to go. And AJ's banging on that sliding glass door, saying, "You can't talk to my children that way. I'm going to fucking kill you. Get out here." Susan's terrified. Absolutely terrified. So she goes to her bedroom and gets her firearm. And when she goes to her bedroom and gets her firearm, she comes out to the living room area. And you'll see pictures of it. And she places herself several feet away from the door, next to a dining room table and next to some chairs, where she eats every meal when she's at home. And AJ's pounding on that door. "I'm going to fucking kill you. Get out here." You'll hear from witnesses. You'll hear from her neighbor, Yvonne Costa, who's an older lady, like Susan, and who lives alone. You'll hear from Yvonne Costa that she was, on that fateful night, she was sitting in a chair, very close to her door. And Yvonne and Susan share a wall. You hear that she was watching TV, and all of a sudden she hears pounding on that door, on that wall that they share. Pounding. And she's petrified. You hear that she's scared. She has no idea what's going on. It scares her. It's so loud, you'll hear that her cats go into her room and under her bed. You will hear that she, at first, was startled, scared to death, and she thought it was Susan banging on the wall. And then it stops. And then she hears more pounding, more banging on the wall. Over and over again. And she's petrified. This time, it's even harder. You will hear that she was scared to death as well, Miss Costa. It was so bad that the wall that they shared was shaking. And you will hear evidence that it wasn't Susan pounding on the wall. In fact, it was A.J. Owens. And Yvonne will testify that she heard screaming, loud, top of your lungs screaming as well. She describes it as when the Marion County Sheriff's Office shows up to the door saying, "Law enforcement here, police here," because the screams were deep and loud. And that's what Yvonne Costa will testify to. Another neighbor called Rosalie Smith will testify as well. And you will hear that Rosalie didn't see anything, but she heard a whole bunch. Rosalie lives about a football field away. And though she didn't see anything, she heard. Though a football field away, she is hearing the pounding on the door. She's going to testify that it sounds like someone's trying to break through a door. And she's hearing screaming a football field away that evening. Loud, terrifying screaming. Well, Yvonne Costa said that this incident lasted about a couple minutes. Rosalie Smith is going to testify that it felt like forever. And the evidence will show that Rosalie's statement that it felt like forever is how it felt to Susan. Susan is sitting there. She has her firearm. She's several feet away from the door. As AJ is pounding on that door, pounding over and over again for minutes, you'll hear testimony that there is a cement wall right next to the door. And it is moving. It is shaking. So much so that there is a mirror on that wall next to the door. And it's shaking as well. And you'll hear evidence. Susan's heart is pounding. Pounding. The kind of pounding that you feel that's so powerful, that's so treacherous, that you feel the heartbeat in your throat. And you'll hear that the banging on that door is so hard that it sounds like a horse through it. But you'll also hear from some children. And you'll hear that AJ was, through the children, you'll hear that AJ was pounding on that door. And she was cursing. She was saying fuck. She was saying bitch. She was saying that bitch. She was mad, and she was mad as hell. And Susan knew it. So we are back to Susan's apartment. Everything is going on. Minutes of this. And Susan's listening to this. Listening to the threats. Feeling fear deep into her soul. Knowing that if AJ goes through that door, she's a goner. And what you will hear is that as AJ's pounding, Susan hears break. And in Susan's mind, in Susan's heart, in Susan's soul, in Susan's core, she feels like AJ is going to commit pulverizer. So she shoots the fire. And you'll hear evidence that the magazine of that gun can carry 6 bullets. But Susan only fired once. She didn't fire twice. She didn't fire 3 times, not 4 times, not 5, not 6 times. Once. In order to save her life. Now, you will hear evidence that Susan thought that, as Rosalie said, this was going to go on forever. But it was actually only 2 minutes. And you'll hear testimony of why individuals that suffer through a stressful situation, why they feel that things went on longer than they actually do. We will present several witnesses. We will present witnesses of that evening, of that night, so you all can have a clear understanding of what occurred then. We will also present professionals that will recreate the scene. And you'll see a video of the recreation of the scene for your consideration. We will also present the testimony of a gentleman by Dr. Roy Bedard, who has a degree in educational psychology, and he specializes in use of force and decision making. And he will testify how individuals make decisions under stressful situations. Such as the situation that Susan was in on June 2nd of 2023. At the end of this trial, we will ask you to find Susan Louise Lorincz not guilty of manslaughter. The death of A.J. Owens is a tragedy. There is no doubt about that. But what the evidence will show, and will be presented in this trial, is that in her mind, in her soul, in her core, Susan Lorincz felt she had no choice at all, but to fire that door. It was either Susan or Ajike. Susan chose to defend herself. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your consideration.
There you have it. For more on the Knocking Neighbors shooting trial, check out the show notes for links to Court TV's continuing coverage of this case. And for the latest in stories just like this one, be sure to tune into my show, Closing Arguments with Vinnie Politan, every weeknight at 8 p.m. Eastern. Thank you so much for listening. And as always, please don't forget to hug the kids.
This podcast is a production of Court TV. Go to CourtTV.com for more content, trials on demand, and to find out how to watch Court TV in your area.